Good morning and welcome to yet another episode of Engine Talk, episode 17, and this is a follow-up to the one I did yesterday regarding Super Tigre engines and their disassembly. And as you can see on the table here, I've got some what I'm calling tools of the trade, and I actually was successful in extracting the sleeve from this G61 Super Tigre engine, and I want to explain how I did it. I mean, this is not new stuff to me. It's just I'd never actually been successful in doing it with a Super Tigre engine until now. Maybe the G90 I was trying was just much tighter. But so the first thing I did was remove the carb, strap a prop to this thing, and heat it up, oil it and heat it up just to get it rotating. Because as I showed in the video yesterday, it was just really stuck, and it was just stuck. It wasn't like rusted or anything like that. So then, of course, the next tool of the trade is always the tried and true popsicle stick. So the popsicle stick is always used to at least get the sleeve to start coming up. So you have to take the exhaust off, get this thing all heated up, and in some instances, you have to cut the popsicle stick down a little bit so that it fits in the exhaust port, because this exhaust or sleeve has a window, or has two windows, so I had to cut that down a little bit. So the theory is here, you put a nice big lever arm on it, heat it up, stick that in there, and then you rotate this up and get the piston to push up on this thing, and it starts to lift the sleeve. 90% of all the other engines I ever work on, that's all that's necessary, especially with an OS, and you can just pull the sleeve right out. Super Tigre, not so much. So I was happy that it didn't even take that much heat. It took quite a bit. I mean, I wasn't going to hold it with my bare hand, but it came up. So then the next thing I did was I took a bit like this, but it was actually the largest one I've got in this Harbor Freight kit. And what I did was I went under, caught the edge of that thing, and I just started levering it up a little bit. Now fortunately this has got a nice broad head on it and it was pretty sturdy, so I just levered it up and I could get that sleeve to come up just a little bit more. And then it stopped. And I'm like, oh crap, it stopped. So the next thing I did, the only other thing I could think to do was continuously heat it and oil it. And then I grabbed my big channel lock pliers, wrapped them with paper towel, and I grabbed the top of this thing, not all the way down at the base where it was contacting the crankcase, but up higher, and I tightened this up just enough so that it was just grabbing this tight enough to hold it firmly, but not deform it, squeeze it, or put any kind of marks on the sleeve. Like I said, I had it wrapped up. And then what I did was, while it was in there like that, I had it on here like that, I used one of these things underneath it as a fulcrum. So if you imagine the pliers gripping the sleeve here, and then using this as a fulcrum, I just push down. Now I know that's a really risky thing to do because there's a high likelihood that you could collapse a freaking cooling fin. Fortunately I didn't, but there is always that risk, because I had this thing sitting here like this, and I got the pliers over here, and I'm just doing a little fulcrum movement, and it was just starting to slowly come up enough, and then there was a point where it came up, I don't know, probably I was just starting to see the ports. And when I just started to see the ports, then I knew I was in good shape. And then I rewrapped the jaws again, and then I was able to just hold the vice grips on there and just turn this, and it came out. Now as you can see here, here's why it was so hard, and I just kind of shoved the piston back in here. This is a ringed piston. And you can see why, because apparently it's not such a good press fit that oil residue and other things can't get in between the sleeve and the casting, because there's a bunch of that in there. So down from beneath, apparently the fitting is not so tight. So I'm wondering if it's really that there's such a tight press fit, or if these things just accumulate a bunch of this stuff that just acts as a glue to hold that thing in place, because you can see the top of this thing is very clean, but below all the ports, it's nasty. So I'm going to take this out on my my, what do you call it? The bench grinder that Harvey sent me with the brass brush, and polish that thing up real good and clean the inside of this crankcase. And we'll do that. So here's the other thing. And many people were saying, well, why don't you just take the connecting rod or slide the connecting rod off the crank pin first? And I've shown this on several other videos, but I don't have a whole bunch of different pistons and connecting rods here that I can just show you. But the reason you can do that with some engines and not others is revealed by looking in here. You see this part right here? I believe that is called the boss of the piston boss, I think. But those things can vary in thickness. Some pistons are designed so that that boss is really thick and you have very minimal movement back and forth like this. Others are not so thick and you can really move it back and forth. And this motion here is the key to whether or not you can get the connecting rod off the crank pin without having the sleeve removed. So think about this. And you can usually tell this by when you have this in the engine still and you like this, you can kind of look in there with a flashlight and tell whether you're going to have this issue or not. If you don't have enough movement here, now granted, these things will stick a lot and they'll be stuck to one side and it'll feel like you can't move it. It just takes effort and a lot of heat, and maybe even LA's totally awesome to chew that grunge up there. But if you can get this thing moving, A, get it moving, and B, if you can look in there and see that you have enough movement that equates to the diameter or the thickness of the connecting rod, then therefore you can get it off. But if you don't have enough movement under the piston between the two bosses that equates to greater than or equal to the thickness of this, you're not going to be able to get this off without having the sleeve out, because the sleeve, the thickness of the sleeve adds to the gap. So in this instance, that little thickness there minus or plus the sleeve being gone, the thickness of the sleeve, equates to enough room to get that off, because obviously it's off and the sleeve was out. So that's why many times you have to take the sleeve out before you can get the connecting rod out. And if you can't get the connecting rod out of an engine, you cannot replace the bearings, period. That's just the way it is. And somebody made a comment on that last video that, well, you can just slide this thing up enough so that you can take the... No, you can't. No, you can't. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't slide the piston up enough to get the crank shaft out, period. It has to come out. It just isn't possible. You can't, there's no way to slide this thing up enough this far to get it out, because if you can slide the piston up this far, how are you going to get it back in? You can't do it with an ABC engine. And I've never ever seen that possible without the sleeve coming up that far. And if the sleeve comes up that far, you got it out. So I mean, some of these things people say just don't make sense, and or they just don't understand, or they've never done it before. So that's a follow-up to this. So now that I've got this engine disassembled, I don't know that I actually have bearings. I thought I had. I don't have a set of Boca bearings for this engine for sure, but I know that when I was given these engines, I believe it was a friend, Kirk, that gave me several of these Super Tigre engines. He gave me sets of bearings, and for the life of me, I can only find the rears. I can't find the front bearings. So I'm not sure that I've actually got replacement bearings for this yet, but I am going to continue to go ahead and disassemble this and get it ready and remove the bearings. But anyway, so that's how I succeeded in doing this. Now, I think it must have been that G90 that I was unsuccessful at doing that last year when I was doing this. But so the other thing is, I just was at Harbor Freight and I called a really good Ace hardware store here in town, and neither of those places sell brass drifts. Now, I've got, a Harbor Freight punch set. And these feel kind of soft, but they're not brass. So I was looking for a brass drift, and I haven't got one. And I've also seen, and I don't know what they're called, I've seen what I call soft nose pliers, where they're kind of like this. They've got curved jaws and they've got soft inserts in there. Now, whether those soft inserts are highly heat resistant or not, but I always thought about if I could get a pair of these soft nose pliers. I don't know if they're called water pump pliers or what they're called. In the military, we just call them soft nose pliers. But they're like channel locks that have pads in the jaws so you can grab things without damaging them. And I was thinking that would be the ideal thing to use for this kind of thing. Now, like I said, whether those jaws are Teflon, rubber, can handle high heat, I don't know, but I'm looking to get a set of those so that I don't have to keep doing this, because this is pretty aggressive, and using a paper towel wrapped around there. I've even tried electrical tape, and that just kind of doesn't last very long. One time maybe, but it's a balancing act between getting it tight enough to really hold it firmly and too tight where it starts to mar. So I mean, it's a balancing act there. But anyway, so I just wanted to share this and show that I have been successful disassembling this engine. Now, does this give me confidence to disassemble anybody's Super Tigre engine? Not quite. I'd like to do a few more as an experiment. Maybe I just go and tackle that G90 again and see if I'm any more successful there. But anyway, that's our engine talk video for today.